I was thinking about this, and I've been thinking about it for a really long time. Salespeople are struggling to figure out how to use video in their sales process. And one thing that I thought about was, what's the easiest way for your customer to relate to you, get to know you, and figure out commonality? That's when you tell your story. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do exactly that. I know there's a lot of people that have been following me for a while, and you know what? You know that I'm passionate about social selling, but let me tell you about my story. So I was born and raised in Marshalltown, Iowa. I was raised by a single mother who's amazing. She crushes it in real estate. She's been in sales her whole life. I got to spend a ton of time with one of the most amazing salespeople that I've ever met in my entire life, and that was my grandfather. They called him Blackjack. So when I was growing up, I was traveling the world, going to direct sales, big conventions that my grandfather was speaking at, and listening to him light a sales room on fire. I remember everywhere that we drove, he had a Zig Ziglar tape playing. He knew Zig Ziglar, he went to all of his trainings. I remember we had early Tony Robbins tapes playing, and my grandfather always ingrained this one thing into my head, and that's, Jack, if you set yourself on fire, the world will come to watch you burn. I didn't necessarily know if I wanted to do sales, even though at 15 years old, my grandfather was teaching me how to pitch somebody in their house. And I'll never forget that. I remember it kind of shied me away from sales, and I didn't know if that was actually my calling. So I went to school, went to Iowa State. That didn't last very long. And then I made the best decision of my entire life, which was to marry my wife, of course. But the second best decision I ever made was to move to Arizona because of this weather. And never again will you find me in cold weather. I hate cold weather. I actually graduated with a hospitality and restaurant management degree, and I worked in hospitality for a while I was going to college. The funny thing is, when I got that degree or was going through that degree, I went into my manager's office at the time. I was working at the Phoenician, a 5-diamond resort here in Scottsdale. And I looked around and he had pictures of his kids, the evolution of them growing up. And I asked him, I said, why do you have all these pictures of your kids? It's like, it just seemed super weird to me. And he said, because I live the life of my kids through pictures because I work so much. And he said, are you ready for that? And I thought to myself, that was the last straw. I was getting out of hospitality and restaurant management. But I do consider that, I worked at the front desk, and a lot of that was sales, right? Customer service and sales, upselling to get people to come in and get a better room. There's a lot of sales tactics involved in that. And that's when I kind of got my first start, other than pitching the heat and smoke detectors in their home. Now, one of the things I have to say is that when I was growing up, my grandfather used to drive down dirt roads in Iowa at 6, 7 o'clock at night and knock on doors, and that's how he got appointments. Back then, the phone wasn't even used that heavily. They were doing door knocking, asking people to come right into their home. So I've seen what sales used to look like at the very, very core of door knocking. Then it evolved, and my grandfather was putting on meetings, right? They were using the phone a little bit. They weren't using email. Still to this day, they don't really use email. They kind of use those same tactics in the direct sales market. But as I evolved and got my first sales job selling pay-per-click, right when pay-per-click was new, I decided that I was gonna stay in sales and I was gonna kind of carry on what my grandfather had instilled in me. Believe it or not, that's sales job. All we did was cold call. We hit the phones and we just asked people for their time and money. And I did very well, but I decided, I gotta move on. I gotta do something bigger and better. I went and became the director of admissions for a nursing school, online nursing school. I sold master's programs to nursing students for 2 years. Then I went on to a company called Interlake Mechalux. When I started working there, that was working with some of the most laggard buyers of all time. Those guys and gals didn't even know what an email address was. But where I started really kind of hitting my stride with the whole social selling ideology and process was actually selling to a laggard buyer. At the time, LinkedIn was pretty new, and I was having a hard time finding addresses and phone numbers for the distributors that I was trying to sell to. I had 5 states, so I didn't know the states, I didn't know the territories, and I couldn't find them on Google. So I started just leveraging LinkedIn at the most basic level. And I'll tell you, that's when I started to understand that there's a better way to start selling. It's not that you don't pick up the phone, but there's so many ways to find information and leverage those insights to make a connection. And I started to do that, but that was just making the connection through their LinkedIn page, giving them a phone call, and setting an appointment. So at the basic core, that's how I got started with understanding this whole social ideology, especially in the sales process as you know it today. The next step is I decided I want to get into SaaS. Technology is where it's at. I got really lucky and had the opportunity to work for a great startup called Acton Software. It's a place where my heart will always be. Had a phenomenal time there, worked there for 3 years. Went to President's Club, was top 5. And I'll tell you, top 5 year over year, month over month. And one of the things I can tell you is that they allowed me the opportunity to start to sell a little bit different. And I remember sitting at my desk and watching everybody cold call and going, there's got to be a better way. Like, why do we have to call people that don't know who we are and ask them for the most valuable thing that they have, right? Their time. It's not their money, it's their time. So I got obsessed, absolutely obsessed with how do I leverage LinkedIn to create, strengthen, and influence conversations? How do I leverage Twitter in a process to create, strengthen, and influence sales conversations along the way? And I'll tell you right now, don't believe the hype. Social selling, whatever they want to say, all the naysayers, is not about not picking up the phone. What I decided was that there's a better way to have conversations when I do pick up the phone, and there's a better way to add value in the sales process rather than just always asking somebody for something. And as it evolved, I decided, you know what? This works. I'm gonna start writing some content. There's still a lot of naysayers out there to this day, but I'll tell you, content absolutely transformed my career. And salespeople out there, I can tell you that everything I teach, everything that I educate about inside of my content is actually practical, actionable things that I've done and got a result from and then put on paper. So I live this every day. I know that there's tons of salespeople out there, you're going, you know what? I'm sick of begging people for business. And I want to help you. That's why I've put together tons of social selling courses that I give away for free. When I started to understand value creation is when my sales and the revenue and everything along with it transformed. And part of value creation was understanding how to use social media to understand my buyers so that I could get visible, valuable, and connected to them in a way that tied commonality and value. And you know what? A lot of sales reps, you're struggling right now. You're trying to figure out, you know what? Everybody says I need to add value, but how do I do that? So value creation is huge in the sales process today. And that's what I'm really obsessed with, teaching sales reps how to understand value creation. How do you take the tools that are in the tool belt right now and integrate them to make your phone calls better, to make your email copy better? That's what I want to teach you how to do. So if you go to skillslab.io, you can check out all the courses that I've created. I don't ask for a penny except for one course we charge for, because my motive and my story comes down to one thing and one thing only, and that's to help salespeople everywhere learn how to use social to sell. And it all starts back from my roots and the way that I was raised. And I just want everybody to know that that's my story. And I think every salesperson should tell their story. Imagine if you had a video that you could send to your prospects or you could send to your current customers so that they could really understand who you are and why they should buy for you outside of just what you sell.